Have you ever wanted to make your own miniature war game or role-playing game module or anything related to gaming, like something of your own? I feel like we all have this desire inbuilt, whether or not we think we're creative people, we have a desire to create. We all want to make something that maybe didn't exist before, or at least an iteration of it. That's how I've always felt throughout my life. I've always labeled myself as not a creative person. I am a more mathematical minded, left brain versus right brain. And over the years, as I've played so many different role playing games, miniature war games, video games, board games, watched movies, TV shows, read tons of books, and admired the universes and the stories that other people were able to come up with. I always wondered if it was really something that I had within myself to be able to do. Whether I could write a novel or whether I could really create a rule set. With mini wargaming, I had the opportunity to try that out with making my own narrative campaigns, but really creating my own rule set from scratch was something that was maybe on my bucket list or something that I really wanted to become part of who I was, as it had been since I was a kid, playing with my brothers with Lego and coming up with stories and bringing them through that and always being the villain and making it so they couldn't possibly beat me, but then they found the weakness and finally defeated me in the end. So that's kind of what brings me to today. I want to talk a bit about the ups and downs and just talk like for real, like just have a real conversation, as much as a video can be a conversation. Of course, I love to hear your comments below about making our own stuff and just the joy that that has, but also like the things that people don't often think about, the immense amount of work that it is and the creativity that you do need to bring to it, and yet maybe sometimes you don't think that you have. And you worry if something is too derivative or too much like something else. Is it unique enough? Does it need to be unique in order to be valuable and meaningful to you and to the people that you produce it for? Ravish Star, of course, is what I'm talking about here, because we're getting really close to the end of our pledge manager for Wave 1. And what that means is that it was such a big campaign that we decided to break it up into 2 waves, and that way we can start getting things to people sooner. Wave 1 being the starter sets, and then the rule book, and everything from the Veil Touch, which is the Not Chaos Space Marine line that we had launched a few years back. So all of that is Wave 1, which we're hoping will be this year. It originally said October. I don't think we're going to make October, but it's a crowdfunding campaign, so you kind of go based on what you're able to get done. And so my hope is that we get Wave 1 out this year and Wave 2 out next year. But we only have 10 days left, or 9 days left by the time this video comes up, for the pledge manager for Wave 1. And what that means is this is the last chance to really get stuff from that before it's available in like a future GameFound campaign or in retailers or wherever else you're going to be able to find it. Anyways, this is not meant to be pushing Ravish Star. I really do want to have a conversation about this, because as I've worked on the rules for it, there's been a few things that has kind of been brought to my attention that has been invaluable for making my own game. The first one I would say is just understanding that you are a creative person and that everybody is a creative person. Now, often when we think of a creative person, we think of somebody who can draw, or somebody who can compose music, or somebody who writes a novel, and I think that's a creative person, whereas I'm more engineered mind, or I'm more mathematical, or maybe I just suck and I'm not creative and I'm not smart or anything at all. And often maybe when we try to create our own things, we find that they end up being too derivative. They just, I'm just making my own fan fiction version of Warhammer 40K, or of Star Wars, or of some book that I read. Or I wish I had thought of that idea before them so it could have been mine. But if you really pick apart anything that anybody makes, you could cry, yeah, it's derivative. It's just copy and paste something else. I've heard that story before. The way that they're developing characters or the universe or the magic system or whatever. That's just like this. And I remember at first always bristling at the thought of that, if somebody were to create a new thing, that we like to label it as the things that it reminds us of. I remember, for example, the game This Is Not a Test, which just is launching its 2nd edition. I'm not affiliated with that, so I'm just excited for it. This Is Not a Test is a post-apocalyptic game, but when you looked at the first version of it especially, it was totally Fallout meets Necromunda. And it didn't really try to hide that. It just is what it was. Joey Maguire, the author of it, obviously has a passion for old school Necromunda and loves the Fallout universe, but didn't have a license to do Fallout, so made his own wasteland with raiders and large mutants and all that kind of stuff. But, with his own twist here and there. But at first, it was just really obviously meant to be kind of Fallout-like. But the rule set really reminded me about Necromunda. And so it was like Fallout meets Necromunda. But I wouldn't ever want to tell Joey that because, that would be insulting him to say that it was those two things. Now I'm just like, no, that's exactly what it is. And it's awesome because of that. Because I love Fallout and I love Necromunda. And so the idea of putting the two together is something new. It's creative. It's unique. It's valuable, even if you can kind of point out where the inspirations came from. So many things that we look at, we try to find, like Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. We say, that's the first time that we talk about Tolkien-like elves. And so the elves are tall and haughty and very noble and maybe, look down upon everybody else. And so a lot of elves since then have been based off of Tolkien's elves. I think about orcs, and the same thing for Tolkien, how he developed his orcs. But then you can look at like Warhammer orcs and Warcraft orcs, how you got that, that big green skin, big muscly thing. And so that other people, when they create their version of orcs, are they inspired by the Warcraft Warhammer orcs? Or are they inspired more by Tolkien orcs? And the answer, the question really is, does it matter which one they're inspired by? Does it make it better or worse? Or Harry Potter, what a really successful set of books and really just a good set of movies. I really enjoyed Harry Potter. And it felt unique, this whole take on wizards and witches in the modern day. But if you really look at it, you can break it down and you can rip it apart and you can see how it doesn't make any sense. And they could have just used this technology and it would have solved all their problems. Or if magic can do that, then why not this? I could rip it apart, no problem. And yet I loved the stories. They were well written, the characters well developed, and maybe you don't agree, and it doesn't matter because a lot of people do, and made lots of money for the author and all these movies and everything, and made new stars. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, if you have these ideas inside of you and you're not working on them because you're worried that they're too derivative or that they're too much like something that already exists, put that aside, because everything has to start somewhere. And the only reason, well, not the only, but one of the reasons that we love the universes that we do is mainly or usually because they're really well developed. And that takes time. So the very first Warhammer 40K thing that came out, the universe was kind of, nobody really knew what it was like. What is it like to travel through the Imperium? Well, now that we have how many books in the Black Library on it, how many releases of Warhammer 40K, and how many codexes that have started to really drill down into all the different aspects of life and the different races, to us now it feels like a real and vibrant place. But that's only because of the amount of information. Age of Sigmar too, like it or hate it, I love it. I love the lore of Age of Sigmar, but not when it first came out, because when it first came out, they didn't define things. The realms were just still kind of like, what's the shape of a realm? What is it like? What happens when you travel through a realm? What's life like? And it took books coming out and new editions coming out before they started to solidify all of that. Same thing with This Is Not a Test. When I look at their second edition, I can see that as much as it has those roots and looking like Fallout and being like Necromunda, it has become its own thing. Every little iteration forward modifies it bit by bit until it becomes its own unique thing. We could look at Warhammer Fantasy and say it was just based off of D&D. We could look at D&D and say it was based off of Tolkien. We could look at Tolkien and say it was based off of other fairy tales. You can always cry that it's a derivative thing. And I guess that's how I feel, because when I look at the comments for Ravaged Star, we've got a lot of positive feedback. I'm going to put that out there first. The Discord community that we have that does the play testing is just tremendous. And maybe that's another part of why I'm so lucky with this, is because we have access to that community. And what does it mean to have access to that community? Well, it's first off, you get tons of people trying it out and you get lots of feedback, which can be hard to sift through and know which is good feedback and not good feedback. But what inevitably happens is that there's a handful of people who drift to the top who end up putting more time and passion into it than even yourself. I'm looking at if I start naming people, I'm going to miss people. But I got to say, like Lower Class Hero, he's He's and that's the username. I'm not calling him a lower class hero. The amount of work that he's put in, the amount of games he's played the game more than me. He's probably put in more hours into the rules than I have. And that might sound bad, but that's what happens when you have a vibrant community and good play testers and stuff, that they end up just grabbing things and really making it their own. So that's been a big help as well. So, if you ever do want to create something, even if you can just grab a few people around you to help out, that helps to lighten the load and give you somebody to kind of work with. And it also helps that become more its own thing as each person puts in their own unique feel to it. It develops it into something of its own. Ravishar will be the same way. At first, people, the big comments, of course, are it's just a 40k ripoff. The Veil Touched are just Chaos Space Marines. The Gorkog are Tyranids, and the Amari are the Votann. And while you're right about the Veil Touch, we created those to be proxy Chaos Space Marines and then created our own game afterwards. But even the Veil Touch, when you look at them, yeah, they're obviously Chaos Space Marines, but they're like Dave's kind of inspiration and combined with iDemo Games, who created them, and their take on it. And then when we decided to make our own game, yeah, we have the Space Bugs and the Space Dwarves, but I can tell you the Space Dwarves were not based off of the Votann. The Gorkog, the Space Bugs, had some Tyranid roots, but they also heavily actually went to Zerg and the Arachnids, and then a little bit of our own stuff as well. But I'm happy to say that when I point to certain models, I'm like, yeah, that's a Baneling. It's a bomb bug that goes. It's a Grudge Mite. That's what we call it. But it goes over and blows up just like a Baneling. And the Flesh Seekers, that's like your Hormigaunt or your Zergling, your basic thing like that. And some people get bothered by that. They're just like, oh, you're just ripping something else off. And I would say that is basically how creativity works, is that we start with what we know and we work from there. And along the way, somehow things start to feel unique. And that takes time. And it just takes writing, it takes experiencing, it takes going through it. So when I guess this is supposed to be an encouraging video for those of you who are aspiring rules writers. And whether or not it's ever going to become a famous game, or whether you're just doing it for you and your friends in a D&D session, just do it. And don't be afraid to take inspiration from the things that you love. Because if you love it, then there must be something good about it. Because one thing I can tell you, after having made videos for 17 years for mini wargaming, after having written narrative campaign after narrative campaign, I think I'm up to 60 or 70 narrative campaigns now. After doing, this September will mark 6 years of almost weekly D&D sessions with my friends, with my wife and some friends, where I've been the dungeon master for a lot of them, if not most of them. And I've been playing role-playing games all my life, but the past 6 years has been really, really constant. And I've written homebrewed stuff and expanded on things based on inspirations of things that I saw and based on my own ideas. I can tell you, after all of this writing, that the thing that makes it special is the people experiencing it. And it's okay that things were based off of things that I already knew. In fact, whenever I want to write new narrative campaigns, the first thing I do is I read books, especially in the universe that they're for. Like I've been reading for Warhammer 40k books and Age of Sigmar books to give me inspiration for new Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar narrative campaigns. And sure enough, inspiration has come, and I've already got some new ideas which will be coming down the pipeline. I'm not sure the full purpose of all this rambling. This isn't a good YouTube video that's just going to draw you in with every 3 seconds a new image or a new flashy thing that kind of keeps your attention. Maybe you've already left and I'm talking to myself by this point. But it's just, I don't know, tell me in the comments below what you think. This desire to create, how have you found yourself embracing it, or how have you found yourself struggling with it in order to really to see things through, whether or not it's for your friends or professionally, or some like this desire in your heart that you're like, I just want to write a novel, but every time I go to do it, I falter and I come short and I just can't get the ideas out. Like where are you on your journey of creativity? And like I said before, I believe that everybody has the ability to be creative. And whether or not it's the traditional creative of composing music just like that, or being able to whip out a piece of paper and a pencil and make up a sketch of something new, or whether it's more like me, where the creativity comes from just long hours of mashing up ideas from different things, and until you don't even know where some of the ideas came from anymore. You end up with something where you're like, I don't remember the inspiration for this anymore because there was so many different things coming together, and then all of a sudden I'd get my own idea. Like for example, when I look at Ravaged Star, the game, I can tell you all the different gaming systems that I drew inspiration from. I can tell you Star Wars Legion gave me the idea that with movement, you only really measure the movement for the unit leader, then everybody else just gets placed there. I can tell you from Judge Dredd the idea for the boost tokens, but they don't use it the same way, but the idea of having a special token when you're pulling tokens to see who goes next. That idea of having a boost token started from Judge Dredd's, whatever they call their tokens. The idea of having Commander and Core and Elite tokens, that's once again Star Wars, because I got the idea for the token pull from Bolt Action, but didn't like that it let you activate anything. So Star Wars gave me the idea of how they do. But I don't like how Star Wars gives you too much control over that, and that lets you manipulate it in your command phase. I can tell you that, oh man, what else did we do? Well, like the obvious shooting, just rolling it to hit and rolling a defense, that comes from Warhammer. I don't know if there was a game before Warhammer Fantasy and 40K that had that basic concept of roll to hit and roll to wound, because we have a lot of different ways that people do that. So I can keep going through and I can pull out different areas where I'm just like, I like the way this game does it, so I'm just going to do it that way. I actually am against the people who are creative to make something unique just for the sake of being unique. I'm not against it, but I find that's a tough thing to do, where people are like, how do I come up with something so new that nobody's seen before? It's like, most likely you're going to fail in doing that. And instead what you need to do is just start creating, and out of all of that, there will spring up things. It's in the doing that you really can start to get creative. If you want to write a book, obviously the way to write a book is to write a book. Some people look at it and say, well, I got to write a whole outline first. Well, some authors do that and some don't. Some are like Tolkien, where he spent all of his time developing the universe, what is Middle-earth, and so that when it came time to write the novels, he didn't have to write them out because he just knew the universe. And so he's just like, hey, if I just start writing, I can figure out what happens next because I know all the locations. I know the motivations of the different races. I know the mythology so well. So he wrote his universe first. So he started that way. Whereas you have like J.K. Rowling, who writes Harry Potter, she gets the idea of all of the books, so that way she can integrate all of this prophecy and stuff up until the very end. And that's a cool way to do it too. And then you get other people who are like, I'm just going to start writing. And honestly, sometimes that's the best thing to do, is just write it. And then if you have to go back and change a bunch of things, or maybe like you're 3 chapters in and you finally, that's when it's like, I understand. I know what this book is about. I know where it's going. And maybe you need to go back and do some revisions in order to make it work. But whatever it is, just start creating. And there's going to be ups and downs. There are going to be people who are your champions, and there are going to be people who criticize. Some people will call it derivative. Some people will call it the coolest thing in the world. And that's really what you have to just kind of do. Do it for yourself. Do it because you want to bring something into this world that is, at least to you, new and unique, and shows your passion and what you want to do. So I guess that's my ramble for today. And if I can throw in a little bit of an advertising pitch for Ravaged Star, like I said, we are 9 days away from the end of our pledge manager, which means that you have 9 days left to be able to get to the starter sets and the rule book before that closes. Question often is, well, when it reopens, because we're going to reopen the pledge manager for wave 2, will I be able to grab wave 1 stuff? And the answer is most likely no. And I say most likely no because we've got to give them final numbers so they can do everything. So if it happens that maybe we have extras, maybe we'll have that. But most likely those extras will be used to stock retailers. And so you'll be able to get it in retail stores, albeit at a slightly higher price because we're offering a discounted price in the Game Found. So this is the best time to grab it. And honestly, I'm putting my heart and soul into this game, and so are a lot of other people, especially play testers and stuff. And I think it's going to be fantastic. I think it's a great game. I have a lot of fun playing it, and I look forward to developing new factions. We have a skirmish game in mind. I've got other games in mind. I'm just liking it so much, but I have to say it's a lot of work, and that's one thing you have to be ready for, is the amount of work. So, want to help us out? Go pledge in the campaign. I'll put the links below. And I'll give you more updates. And let me know if you like these types of videos where I just kind of ramble on about a specific subject. And if you have an idea for what the subject is, leave that in the comments as well. Anyways, I've talked enough. Let's sign off. Thanks for watching. Happy working.